Okay. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Welcome to episode 16 of Slay House Review. I will say, immediately off the bat, I kind of am under the influence of multiple different, substances. We have a couple of, pathways being sort of, occupied and doused with all different sorts of experiences. So we'll see, the extent I'm able to kind of, get through talking. I've already felt kind of like a retard talking to you since I've gotten here. I feel like I'm doing the whole stuttering stifled thing.
No, you've been doing great.
Thank you so much. I was just fishing for a compliment and you gave it right to me, and that's what a hag and a fag, that's how that relationship should exist.
Absolutely.
You're how absolutely are you? Right. How are you, Devin?
Me, I'm good. Nothing to report. That's it.
Are you reading anything?
Unfortunately, no.
I'm not either. I went to the beach and I started Sister Carrie, which did you have to read Sister Carrie for? I'm so shocked that Leonard Davis didn't assign that.
Yeah,
ever.
He always was invoking it, but he did not.
I was supposed to read this book in undergrad one time and I never did, but I've always been saying I'm gonna reread it. And since it's a book from the 1800s, I've been kind of flaunting it to the people in my life who aren't you and aren't familiar necessarily with literature, because I want them to think something of me. But I read maybe 45 pages of it on the beach a week ago when I was on Adderall.
Was it good? Did you like it?
I did really like it. Mind you, I was reading a page a minute, just but
that's the way to do it, girl.
I mean, any story that's about a striving small town slut who moves to the big city and just causes trouble to make her money,
that's my shit.
The girls have been whores and strivers and sluts for all of human history.
Is it Victorian era? So
it's the 1880s, so I don't know. If Lucas was here, I'd be
that's Victorian.
It is Victorian?
Yes.
I mean, it's very slay.
Oh, by Dreiser.
And it's a local Chicago story. It's about the city of Chicago and the experience of living in Chicago in the Victorian era.
I actually kind of want to read this, so let me know.
I actually do really like it, and I'll just give it to you.
You and I have that shared little love of Victorian, random Victorian
bitchy, cuntiness.
Exactly.
Yeah. They were the last
Victorian slay.
Perhaps not the last cunty era in history, but definitely one of
they were, let's say they doubled down on what they believed in.
Absolutely. And you know what? That's all we ever ask of anybody, is to double down. To double down.
We've been watching all that poker. It's getting to us. Fascinating. Fun. Totally agree. Okay. So
one other thing I was just going to say, just because I do kind of having these tangents in here, I was really kind of thrilled and kind of felt allured by last week's episode and how much we didn't talk about this story.
Yeah, I don't even remember, to be honest, what the story was, because I only read one of them. Right?
Slay.
Wasn't there another one and you filled me in?
No,
that was 2
weeks ago, I think. Whatever.
I don't even know. What story? Oh, I remember.
It was the Turkish woman that I really liked.
Yes.
And I've been always downloading these people's ebooks off of Z Library after I find a story, but I'm never gonna read any of these story collections. But it's nice to do for myself,
It's nice
to just say I'm going
to.
Okay. So
this story.
Yeah, so we're doing Abject Normalism Abject Naturalism by Sarah Braunstein. And there are so many just wheels kind of turning in this that feel, again, not to beat a dead horse, and truly it's I don't necessarily want to do this bit every fucking episode we record, but sometimes it is a little bit uncanny. A story about a woman who, living in a proxy or sort of unspoken, implied Portland, Maine, which Devin has history in Portland, Maine, the woman in question has gotten her MFA in fiction writing, but decided to give up writing after having a kid out of wedlock. Yeah. And she's, living as a single mother in Portland, Maine, or basically Portland, Maine. And she becomes acquainted with and falls in love with, and her baby is by a guy she knew in grad school but was too gross to fuck, but then he ended up fucking her by leveraging his position in the literary world, and then he ends up becoming a big old novelist, and he's well, I don't want to deal with the kid, so she's raising the kid as a single mother. And then that woman goes on to then, in this story, encounter a strange, old, possibly pedophilic old man who's lived in the town, still lives in his mother's house. His mother's now dead, but he lives in his childhood house, named what? What is the guy's name? Marco. When I was in the car listening to this fucking story,
screaming,
and they said,
screaming.
Yeah, they said, whatever the line was, like,
Marco?
oh yeah, my name's Marco. Your name's what? What is your fucking name? I swear to God. So if you're slow to the uptick right now, like the, anchor character, this isn't third person, so it's not, our narrator, but it's our basic narrator. It's a very close third, is, in my opinion, a very clear Devin proxy.
Yeah.
Oh, and then
it's fucked up.
The guy she ends up fucking and sucking in the end is also a very clear me. He has my fucking name.
Yep.
And it's also just like, again, my archetype of kind of being like a burnout who's old and never really made anything, lives in his mom's house, kind of like lower class, kind of like a little bit eccentric. He lives alone. He's got all this trash. And everybody thinks, I don't think people think I'm a pedophile, but sometimes I get really actually kind of like paranoid about it. Because I'm a big man and I like cute things and I like things that, I like media and products which are geared towards little girls. So sometimes when I like engage in open like fandom or adoration of cute things, I'm like, oh my God, I feel like people think I'm like a pedophile.
I mean,
like,
Gen Z is probably like would call you a pedophile.
They probably
in the comments,
would.
It's like
I really truly think like that would be like, not to like, let's knock on wood as to not wait. If I wanted to knock on wood, would that mean I want it to happen? I'm like,
no. When we knock on, if you're like, so hopefully that doesn't happen to me.
Knock on wood.
Yeah.
I don't know why I say knock on wood all the time. Like I said,
you do.
We've got a lot of things
you
going
also
on
hate
up here.
Children.
Yeah, and so but the thing is I always kind of fear that like when I like pop off, eventually I'm gonna like face some sort of like allegation. And like in my head, I've always thought like I feel like I'd be able to like navigate that pretty well, but like I know it would like eat me up. Alive.
Yes, a false accusation of like that.
Just like a vague cancellation of like maybe I said something or like posted something and it's like can be construed as like wildly like inappropriate, and then it having to be like, well, yeah, it was, but like it's like, I'm like, it's like, like girl time.
Right.
Like I don't really know what, and it's like I don't really know what to say like beyond that.
It's satire.
Yeah.
I think is
oh
all
my God, I'm
to say.
sounding like fucking Bret Easton Ellis. That's all he fucking talks about. Or Andy Cohen. That's all Gen X gay men really are concerned about. If you listen to an hour of like Andy Cohen radio on Sirius XM, he's always just going on and on about cancellation.
Oh my God. Slay.
Okay. Well, you go ahead. Why don't you talk? First thoughts. Just did you feel weirded out? Do you feel this was? I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah. So that was a great.
I'm trying to be
me off perfectly.
I'm trying to be like really sort of, again, after listening to last week's episode, I was like, okay,
yeah,
I should like, volley somewhere.
Oh no, absolutely doing great.
Thank you so much.
I think like, okay, so you guided me to write some interesting feelings that I'm experiencing about this story, which is that like there is something about it that is uncanny and sort of like parallels our existence, and like not in a way that makes I actually think it's kind of the point of this story in a way, to sort of just be, oh, well, it's like kind of about nothing and it's about everything. Do I think that ultimately was like successful? Like, yeah, kind of.
That's exactly how I feel about it too. Like, I guess.
But like, did I like it? We can save those thoughts for later.
Yeah.
But I think specifically there's something about like, okay, this sort of like, I don't know if it's a trope, maybe these tropes are just too close to like, to us, but like this woman who like, why am I always reading these pieces of media about this woman who gives up her career to have a baby? And I'm like, I wonder why. I don't know. I think feeling like perhaps like
I do think it's like like very plausibly like Devin and Marco alternate universe fan fiction, but I'm sure that's also this woman's experience as well.
Right.
I mean, I'm on her website right now and she has a contact page. Maybe you should like email her and be like, I'm a young writer and I really identified with
facing a lot of challenges pursuing my art in the face of like the demands of womanhood, which is exactly what this story is about. In case anyone,
email, you need to help me. Deborah Treisman of the New Yorker has been harassing me with a covert surveillance.
She's been surveilling me. Oh my. I should definitely do that.
Wait, but what the fuck was I gonna say? I mean, there was a couple of things I wanted to say, but there was one pertinent thought that's escaping me now, which was like, with this thing with like tropes and a woman giving up a career for a baby, and specifically, I feel like this woman giving up a creative career, and then, one complaint I have about this story is like, this bitch is really kind of throwing everything. Any connection, any thought, any like theme, any like anything that really came up for her when kind of like thinking about this, just, I'm gonna throw it in, I'm gonna allude to it. Right. So we are dealing with, like in the text, literally, a level of, this is a story about a writer, and we're meant to, by the end of it, which I really think this is the corniest fucking ending we've read of any of these stories so far. We'll get into it when we get there, but truly, I was like feeling sort of apathetic about this when I had been reading it. But then when I read that last line, I was like, oh, brother.
Yes.
And so the last line works in a way which acknowledges that this preceding piece of writing was a constructed story.
Yes.
And the beginning is about,
you're cooking.
There's a lot of time devoted to how this woman used to be a writer, used to enjoy writing, but then was meant to give it up, not only because she had a child, and this was the other thing that I felt was targeted, like having like negative like workshop experiences by like a faculty in a cohort that like actively wants you to just like die.
Give up, yeah.
And so I guess my complaint with just really identifying all this, and I mean the conclusion isn't necessarily as like zingy as the lead up has been. I just thought it was really like I don't think you necessarily have the space to do all of this in this girl. Like and I mean I guess I kind of have to give it to her because she really kind of puts her balls on the table with each one of these.
Right.
And I mean we can talk more so after this about like her weird like inclusion of like racial themes, which like have nothing to do with the story at all, but and yet she really does feel the need to invoke this like racial class awareness many times through the but it's like, so I really do kind of admire that she's like, well, fuck subtlety. Like, I don't want to think about this for more than like, the couple of weeks that the drafting process took. Like, whatever. Like, I don't need to make this subtle. Whatever. I'll just throw it there.
There is this sort of, inclusion of everything that makes it actually feel a little bit more real because there's so many complex emotions instead of just sort of simply sketched, like, for example, the Chicago on the Sun, which is like very clearly like aims to explore one
I've got
set
one
of
thing
emotions.
and I've planned to now sort of like drive this to its conclusion.
But of course, real life is not like that. It is more like this, where it's a complicated mess of things.
Absolutely true.
So this is a lofty, I mean, she reached really high. And I will say it's largely successful.
You saying that right now actually did kind of convince me into what's the title of this piece? The abject naturalism of the narration.
Right.
Which then, I mean, I don't know. Do you feel like it loses credit because it was done in a close third and not in a first?
No, I think it actually, this is probably the best example of a close third. Like, this is actually when it really works better than first person.
You actually are kind of convincing me to kind of up my, like, prepared score for this story.
No,
I really kind of actually think you're cooking here.
It's
women supporting women. Someone has to do it because
someone's got to do it.
You know me. At any chance I'll get, I will tear down the work of any woman anywhere.
Absolutely.
I will gleefully do it. So, good for you. You're standing up.
I'm a doormat.
You've got pussy camaraderie. Okay, and speaking of pussy camaraderie, just as a side note, looking at this picture of her on my iPad, has she dipped into, as Andy Cohen would say to invoke him again, has she dipped into the lady pond? Has she tasted pussy on her lips?
Yes. But she's giving Oh, she would have a beer with us and leave after the first round.
She's nicer than the two of us, and nice. She's like I would say, just looking at her harder face, than both of us, and she takes things a little more seriously, but she's not. And you can tell from the way that, she can tell the way that this narrator, because I really do think this narrator was not a narrator. Sorry, the anchor character was self-insert. I think this was thinly, probably veiled experience, which, like, you know, Slay Girl, we all do it. But just looking at her face, she really does remind me of a certain woman with OCD that we went to grad school with. You know, she has that sort of ambiance to her, like accommodating, understanding, but, you know, a bit neurotic.
And hold it sort of arm's length.
And as we know of the real life example, that woman also has is she only a lesbian? Does she date men?
No, actually.
I think.
I'm really not sure.
I'm actually really not sure either.
I mean, it's giving. Who's to say?
Yeah, you know, it kind of actually is giving who's to say. And
which
you know
I think is very slay.
I appreciate the mystique, and I kind of like the design of her website as I'm looking at it right now. I was
actually going to say the same thing, and I'm actually going to see what theme she's using on WordPress.
On like Squarespace or whatever. I kind of like she has her initials front and center, SB. I like the font she chose. I like kind of, you did a good job. I think she did this herself. Okay, anyways, getting back to the story. So I guess my point with the like writing and like this is a construction, it's also a story about telling stories, it's a story about being a writer.
Because did you catch the shift to present tense in the last paragraph?
No, I didn't, but because I was so distracted by that stupid fucking ending. I mean, I really thought the ending line, we might as well just get into it now. I thought that ending line was stupid. I thought it was really like,
I think it is like, it's in character with this character.
Oh, you're right.
But didn't. But it was cheesy. I mean, it's cheesy because the way that this character thinks is a little bit like flat. Like, but that's what she's exploring.
And I mean, like, and I guess it's like really true. Like, this is the kind of person that like was kind of like okay to like bad in like a grad school workshop, who then kind of like burns out and then lives like, you know, just a womanly life like that. That is how she would end this experience.
And I thought it was in some ways compelling that she ends up fucking Marco, but in other ways I thought it was sort of entirely too obvious, which I guess actually mirrors the exact criticism, which I thought was actually pretty smart, that's included in the story that the teacher gives.
What line are you talking? Oh yeah.
When he's like, it just is. What it was like, it doesn't earn it or something like that.
That's
and
the
so
other thing I wanted
it's
to talk
kind of
about.
a fuck you that this piece is written and then presented in that way. And it's like, I feel kind of the same way.
And I will say, I do feel a sort of camaraderie, because I'm sure she had this exact same experience in grad school when she was in grad school. Like,
totally.
Like, just like some bullshit, some like old man that's leading your workshop who's like really has nothing really to speak of himself. Just like kind of rambling on about some like vague sort of like philosophic critique of your like dismantle my pussy just because I wanted to be a little pussy pilled.
Right, just because I was quote unquote mean to my characters.
Yeah,
it's like,
oh
okay,
God.
I mean, slay, I can completely relate to that. So did I enjoy the little digs she got in at MFAs? Totally. I absolutely
did too. And I thought also the characterization of her, like the father of her child, was also pretty accurate towards just like grad school douchebag who against all odds somehow does end up being fucking successful. But the other thing I wanted to say, just still on this last line about like, but that doesn't happen in this story. In this story, it's like, you know, I will read.
Yes. It's weirdly editorialized.
And what else? And I guess what I was trying to ask initially was, do you believe its inclusion at the end? Like, do you think we're clued in enough throughout the whole story to earn kind of like
the
breaking of the fourth wall and addressing us as an audience and a reader kind of directly? I don't think so. No, I don't think so at all. And I mean, like, yeah, it could have been fixed if, you know, I don't know, there was a little more, you know, playing between the lines like throughout the whole thing. But I almost feel on the contrary to that, like just take out that fucking stupid ending line.
Literally, I think that is, you're exactly onto something, because it wants, I get the sort of like urge here, I think, is that if like this is a discursive piece in which, you know, by the end Tony is sort of like writing her own story now. She's beginning to write again, right?
Yes. Oh, and that actually goes in pretty conveniently to like the scaffolding I just wanted to address of like just, you know, thematically between like girlhood and like yeah.
Totally. But do I feel like it's earned like on the sentence level, like compositionally speaking? No, I don't
because
think
it's jarring.
It's too close. It's POV, third person. Before that, all you need to even do is change that to like she was thinking about
this. Yes, exactly.
Or 2 words would have made it more believable.
Even just like she was told to write stories like this or something, you know, like alluding back to grad school. Like I don't know. And here, I do want to read it. Okay, wait. Let me find the point. Okay, this is like the last paragraph, and it's not like the last sentence entirely, but it's like a couple of sentences before the last sentence. So it's, while the sky is so lovely and strange and their glucose levels have not yet plummeted, she feels entitled to everything she wants. Ambition is ascendant. Danger everywhere, but it's not. Look at that in this story. In this story, no one lays a finger on any child. Which, I mean, I do have to give her kind of credit. And when I heard that line for the first time, and then when I read it, I was like, okay, I guess she did sort of predict that I was expecting him to actually be a pedophile in the end. So like, yeah, you got me, girl.
It's a little bit of a wink, but
it also truly is like, I don't know, do we got to be girl bossing it up for the New Yorker in your short story? Like, do we really got to be doing, like, it's Target hardcover, or not even Target paperback romance.
Yeah, it's
like sort of, you know, conventions, just sort of like, you know,
it doesn't,
like, I got you there.
It's not surprising. I think it wants to be, the desire is for this to be a surprising, like, winking gotcha at the end, but I don't feel as though the stakes were ever so high that, like,
because it was kind of very
relief in any
clear
way.
The whole time that he was not a pedophile, who's just like a nice dude, and this was kind of like a
and
I will say, since to invoke like the sort of like subgenre of like Target like paperback romance, like I think this story really falls kind of cleanly in line with like the sort of style of that genre.
Yeah, like thematically speaking.
And so I guess she, like, you know, is in conversation, I guess, perhaps with like a, you know, established sort of like way of writing. But again, it's just sort of weird for this to be here, like in the New Yorker.
And the way that it actually, I feel like it is actually at odds with the goal of this piece to sort of embody abject naturalism, to then include this strangely sort of overcomposed, like, contrived ending, which I understand is part of the project, but like I don't feel like
you would also necessary. Think that, because by the end of it, I feel like we as readers are meant to like say that abject naturalism actually is great, and that's what contentment is.
And that's I don't know if I feel that way, girl, by the end of this.
Exactly. And it's like, so if that's the way I'm meant to feel, why are you then suspending like reality here, or plausibility, and like stepping outside of naturalism and doing something within the text? It's like, I don't know. It's like, I don't know, Deborah Treisman, if you're the one that combed over this, I think you could have maybe like pushed these questions a little bit harder. Again, I said this maybe 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, like, you know, you're getting probably paid so much, like, you can do your job a little bit as an editor.
Can, you know, edit the story.
But I will say, I think that is kind of like hopeful about this piece, and just like Sarah Braunstein as a woman and as a woman being in the New Yorker is, she doesn't have a Wikipedia article. She kind of does seem like a nobody. I mean, she does have a book that recently came out that, you know, was published by a mainstream publisher, but like, I don't know, it's nice to see someone who does not have a Wikipedia page getting a story in the New Yorker.
It absolutely is. And it's also nice to see the New Yorker lean into some pussy-pilled space. Be like, okay, we finally have, like, instead of a dying, decrepit woman, we have,
we have someone youthful whose face still is, you know, plausibly, like, within her, like, 30. I mean, I think she's 48 years old. I think from this photo, if it's a recent photo, she's like,
I mean, she looks great.
She's a great 48.
Yeah, so she's, you know, up and coming in that sense still. So I guess we can, you know, take some.
I mean, I guess that kind of on principle, like, I do like a lot of what this piece was working with, and like kind of the wheel she was spinning. But
it's really well crafted.
Yes, exactly. But the thing is last week I also felt was really well crafted, and I came away from listening to that story being like, this was really good. Like, this was really well done. And I don't, even after talking about it, like, I can see what she was going for, and I respect with what she was going, but I didn't the times that I engaged with the story, I wasn't left feeling like that was good.
Right.
That was satisfying. That was nice.
Really care that
yeah, I didn't give a fuck.
The content enough. You know, it's like, okay, like.
Oh, I do want to talk before I forget about like these weird lines about like race and class that she like tries
which
to put
in the interview she says that she's sort of exploring like somebody who's like both comfortable because they're white but like uncomfortable because of their class.
I'm like, but where? Like, when did this story do any of that?
It was sort of just like
her
not
interview
necessary.
Actually, like the more completely unnecessary. And her interview made like very little sense to me actually, because she was like attributing things and like sort of intense in this story that like were not at all there. It felt like from the interviews that we've read so far, that felt like the most like the writer is like imposing something like very much like, not actually in the story. So that was sort of curious to me. But wait, I have to find the actual line, because it, like every time I read it, I would be like, okay, girl, like, all right, what was it? It was like about like how like, well, it's classist not to feel horny, but it's classist to be horny about this too. About like,
oh my god, wait. Oh yeah,
it was about like
it was her
old
moving
picture
into
of
the
him,
house. Yeah. Where was that?
Wait, yeah. Oh wait. Okay, wait.
Okay, she's like,
I mean, in the meantime, while I'm scrolling, I will say, I mean, what is it with writers and always writing like young daughters as these like precocious, like manic pixie dream girls?
I know, it's
can't a little girl just be fucking normal in a short story?
Right? Does she have to be like super girl?
like does she have to like really have an interest in dead bugs and the stars? Like, oh my god. Can we please just like write
all
a
the little
normal
boys
10-year-old?
In our stories have just been normal 10-year-olds.
Exactly.
Like, this girl has to be just like weirdly like
this like so intellectual and like insightful, like
she was
wonderkin.
Actually born with Natalie Portman over the ear headphones on. Like, okay, girls. Like, I saw Garden State and I got over it.
From an early age, my child expressed interest in listening to Neutral Milk Hotel. Like,
it's like, okay.
It's like those tweets back, or no, they were Facebook posts back in the day where it was like, my 4-year-old daughter looked at me after Trump had been on the news and said, Mommy, is this really what our country has come? It's very like, I don't, and I really don't understand why millennial writers are so obsessed with making children like this in fiction.
Right,
it's all over all contemporary fiction
it's really weird.
Within the last 20 years.
Especially it's honestly like Lolita pilled.
No, it really is.
Alone.
Everybody always wants to get all high and mighty about like sexualizing children or exploring taboo topics, but like you guys are, you know, authors, the most identity politic pilled, like hug box authors love like attributing like sort of misplaced maturity on a child,
right?
Giving them some sort of like cosmic intelligence. It's like,
okay.
I don't know, you're kind of like working in the same arena.
Exactly, you're at least in the same stadium. Okay, wait. I know what you're talking about, but I cannot find it.
I can't find it either. But
she's thinking about the house and where she'd put the bedrooms, right?
No. There's a lot of just, like, okay, because we really have been kind of talking at length, but like we also are, the other thing about this story, like when I say that it's spinning so many wheels, like there's a lot of little like weird asides in this story, like about him. Okay, so at the end of the story, like the way that their first like kiss is initiated and then they like end the story pretty much there is she goes, so the premise is that old creeper Marco gave the anchor character's daughter Tony, Tony is the character and her daughter's name is Amelie, and so Marco gave her daughter this telescope, and then Tony, like all sort of outraged by that, like stomps to her house, like, how dare you
talk to my daughter?
Yeah, now my daughter's gonna think it's okay to talk to creepy old guys, and this like initiates kind of like a romance, which actually, now that I'm talking about it, is so funny that like she went to confront a man in the neighborhood about possibly being a predator, and then she's like almost kind of immediately after talking to him for the first time being like, oh fuck, like shit, like maybe I'm a little bit wet right now. That is kind of hysterical. But I will say, I don't think Sarah Braunstein intended for it to be that way. But
I don't think it was meant to sort of, but I mean, yeah, really
kind of hysterical.
Quite.
But fuck up. Okay, so a big part of the story revolves around this telescope that Marco gave to Tony's daughter Amelie. And so by the end of it, the scene before they finally kiss, she like runs over to Marco's house at night because she can't figure out how to put this part that she had to order online to fix the telescope for her daughter. She can't figure out how to do it, but she's like, okay, well, I'll take a chance and I'll go now. And my pussy is so wet and I'm just going to do it.
Right.
And so then he like discloses to her once they figure out the telescope, like, oh yeah, I use this telescope to spy on all of my neighbors.
Yeah, which is so random.
Which is so random, but I guess like she wanted to characterize this old guy as like an eccentric and like, yeah, I get it. But then even in addition to that, there's this weird aside, like the man in the window was lying next to a person with a clump of black hair and I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman, and he was rubbing his genitals and reading a book about screenwriting. And then there's this like weird exchange of dialogue where Tony is like, remember, Marco, you have a niece. And he's like, yeah. And she's like, and she works in security. And he's like,
it was so strange.
It's like,
okay, what am I supposed to be getting from this?
Like, I feel like she's trying to do so much in like a brief exchange of dialogue, which is like kind of what we're always told as writers, to like use the space of dialogue to like tell things about a person and about their intentions, yada, yada, this, that, and the third. But it's like, so much like disparate random shit that she's just been sort of throwing at the wall. She like tries to punch into what is like maybe a half a page of like action, and it's like it becomes inscrutable by the end. Like,
where are we?
How am I supposed to feel after this? Like, what are you kind of going for? Like, am I supposed to be like a little creeped out? It's like, am I supposed like how am I supposed to feel?
Are we laughing this off?
It's
or
like,
are we like,
and also is like is the neighbor like being a like young, like possibly homo screenwriter who's like lightly masturbate? Like why do I have to like?
Why are we experiencing this moment?
And I guess it's just like, you know, usually again talking about it, and it's so weird with this story. It's like when we talk about it, I'm like, yeah, I guess I kind of respect this from a craft standpoint in the sense that I do usually like writing that works that way, and
that it usually leaves you something to chew on.
And I usually do write that way where it's like you just sort of place a bunch of like disparate, contrasting images and dialogue, and you use that to
all this stuff about the toilet too.
Yeah, the Japanese toilet. But it's like truly like there is through lines that it's not just because it's not just one thing. Like all of these little breadcrumbs, like she does want them to like say something. I think in her interview she like brings up like, I want these questions to be like bobbing in the water.
Right.
That it's like I don't know how to track all of these things. Like
there's
really,
a lot
truly
to track.
What at the end of the day do you want me to feel?
Right.
Like
I don't and I still can't even find. I'm literally still looking for that. Like
I think we're just like so sort of locked in.
Yeah.
Oh wait, I think I found it. Okay. Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. So this is after she reads. So she Googles him, and this is like a big deal for her to like Google him because she's, I don't know, she like feels like it's invasive that she wants to Google him and make sure he's actually like not a pedophile. But she finds his mother's obituary, and by the end of it, she's like imagining what he might have been like as a teenager. And she goes, okay.
She put them in clothes.
She closed the computer. She imagined a group of boys roaming the neighborhood. She put them in clothes like they wore in The Outsiders, greaser gear, Levi's and dingy white t-shirts. Poor white boys, working class boys before they worked. It was classist to be turned on, she thought, but also not to be. Like, what? Like, what the fuck are you talking? Like, okay,
sure.
Like, all right. Like, truly, like, Sarah, what the fuck are you talking about? What does that have to do with anything? Like, I guess thank you so much for the pussy update. Like, I'm glad to know that she was wet
Tony's
after
like,
reading.
Yeah. Obituary.
Which, oh, God, I feel kind of bad now because every time, like, we're saying, or I guess I'm saying something, I'm like trying to I'm like, yeah, that's kind of fun, but like, I don't know, the overall effect, if you were to go in and read this story, I feel like you would know what we're talking about. It's just sort of like, okay. And I think that's the more I talk about it, because like I do generally think this whole thing was kind of an earnest attempt at like a meet cute feel good sort of story about people that are sort of operating in this downwardly mobile space in time in our current stage of like, I don't know, like late stage American empire capitalism.
Right, exactly.
So it's like weird that like all of these like kind of like, I don't know, like poor white boys, you know, it's like these kind of like things and sentiments you expect in something a little bit more like subversive and dissident, like being here. It's a little bit like,
yeah, it sort of seems like, I'm just not sure what to make of the sort of decoration around some of this. Is like,
like, am I like,
okay, I'm not sure how to take this. I'm not sure if like it does what it's doing, and it's like fun. I'm not like mad about it, but it's like sort of puzzling, which I don't know if it feels ever fully realized, because like it feels just sort of tossed in. It's sort of a mixed salad of a lot of different breadcrumbs.
And like tone and kind of like sensibility. It's so weird. And then there was another okay, I have to find this other passing line. So another thing that like was also kind of weird to like, you know, poor white boy and like class stuff is like the weird allusions to like race and like the racial demographic of this community. There's like a thread she's trying to spin about gentrification, but then it's also like we're meant to like, and really not to be all like SJW about it, but it's like, well, why are we acknowledging that this town is being gentrified and that the people who would probably suffer the most are like low income people who are Black? But then why is it that throughout the story we're actually meant to feel more sorry for this white woman and her like child being just like, why even include it? And it's not necessarily, and when I say that, it's not that I have an ideological opposition to like poor little white woman. It's like, because this story I feel really was written so earnestly and not with any hint of irony. It's like, why include this to discredit your own like
it undermines our emotional connection
and like our fondness of this you know, it's like so. But there was one passing line about how her little daughter like conceives of race.
With the
such a weird conclusion. Inclusion. Sorry, where the fuck was it? Oh, okay, wait, it's lower.
Oh, it's at the.
Do you have it like
no.
Amelita doesn't like to play with, people think Amelita's annoying or something. Wait. Oh wait, no, I think it's.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. She says that there's like a lot of refugees
yes. Okay, found
at the school.
Okay. Amelie's elementary school was diverse, dozens of languages spoken there, but the playground nearest their house was generally occupied by white children. Once she'd asked Amelie, "Do the African children play by themselves at school?" Amelie considered the question for a good while. All she said was, "Halima is really annoying." Like, again, girl, okay, like what the fuck are you talking about? Like, it's so weird. And also, just to point out, you know, to continue to beat a horse, Amelie considered the question for a good while. Like, really, this 10-year-old girl is really taking a moment to ponder and consider and sort of get the divine inspiration before speaking and giving a cryptic answer for her mother to think deeply about. Like,
okay.
And again, like, I guess in sort of isolation, it might not seem as dramatic the way I'm recounting it to you, but like the vast majority of this story is concerned with this woman mirroring kind of her daughter, her like 10-year-old daughter now finding her own independence and like the mother feeling sort of uncomfortable about that, while simultaneously the mother is now also experiencing a kind of girlhood and finding a renewed independence and excitement for life. And that's really what the vast majority of this, how this story operates. That's what all the sort of dialogue, scene work, you know, imagery is concerned with. So these really weird, just like asides about these kind of like taboo, like risky territories are so just like,
it's just sort of
like, okay, like I guess, like,
sure.
I don't know. I feel like the more I'm talking about it, the more over dramatic I'm seeming.
No, it is. I mean, it is a bit of a overall like a hodgepodge of all these different breadcrumbs, which I think is, you know, kind of
I feel like I've just been talking over you again for the last like 20 minutes.
No, I've just been considering.
Just like Amelie would.
Right, just because I'm such a cryptic young girl.
And you just have so much
mature beyond my years and, you know, want to be independent. But no, exactly. It's like it's mostly about the mother-daughter. I think like my ultimate thoughts are like, it is
And I thought that was done well. I think if it would have focused just on that, I would have kind of left being like, okay, I see what you're doing. And great.
And I thought it was super well crafted. I thought it was ambitious. And I thought for the most part, it like does achieve what it sets out to do. Am I fully on board with what it's setting out to do in the first place? Like thematically, I just don't really like feel necessarily a super strong like compulsion towards these characters. I find them like, you know, compelling, but not like I don't like care that much.
Yeah, exactly.
At the end of the day. But I thought it was well written, and I enjoyed the story for what it was.
And like what that makes me just think about and return to again, and I guess it is really sort of like torturous because she kind of does gesture towards this throughout all of this. Like there really, I think, is a lot of potential in this. But at the end of the day, a big ideological stance, this is very much, you know, thesis statement. Like I feel kind of proud of this, so I hope it comes out correctly. The ideological sort of thesis of this piece is that these sorts of stories are just as valuable, if not more valuable, than the sort of like highbrow literary kind of masculine ways of communicating, storytelling, living, and conceiving of just like a artful existence. And so if that's what you're going for, then you know the piece should be engaging and making believe that, you know, at the end of the day I'm like, well, I guess maybe not. Like, I don't know, girl, you didn't really convince me. Like,
that's the thing. I'm not sure that I was convinced.
Exactly. Like, you know, it's like, at least, you know, if put your pussy into it. Like, don't just, like, really make it interesting. If you want me to come away from this thinking like, you know what? Yeah, there is something great about everyday life. There is something compelling about framing a story like this, living like this. And there's just as much value as someone who's fully dedicated to the art of literature. Like I want to feel it a little bit more. I want to agree with you. You just kind of have to give it to me. And
like, I want to be as ready to like fuck Marco the neighbor as she is. And right now I'm being told that like that is, but I'm not really feeling it myself. And I think we need to get a little more interiority. Like that's not just sort of logical.
The other thing that I thought was so funny is like anytime I've noticed this across a lot of things I've read, and I feel like this has come up in like New Yorker stories. It's like anytime an old man becomes a sexual object in a story, the narrator has to go out of their way to know that he's not some like ugly, like sagging blob like he probably would be, but that you can see the outline of his like muscles that he's like very dutifully like kept up all these years because he's so old. So actually you wouldn't think he's fuckable, but he really is fuckable. And the fact that I'm like getting to experience this now is like my reward for like having interest in this man, because he really actually is hot, and I don't have to have sex with a repulsive sagging bag of like rotting flesh. It's like, why is it that all these old men in these stories, they're always fuckable, when it's like, no, this guy would be fat and sagging. Like, anyway, exactly. Like, and that, you know what, if he was gross and she said, you know what, and that is what the real, if we're all about realism here,
make him ugly.
Yeah.
I agree.
Like this old guy, his pectorals were not, the line is something like, oh, his pectorals were peeking through his velour robe. I'm like, no, they fucking weren't,
make him
girl.
saggy.
Yeah. He's got man boobs and you're being fucking generous. But now that I'm saying this also, I mean, if we are to understand that this third person narration is her writing it,
then maybe she's embellishing his hotness, which is kind of interesting, but I'd like to see that a little more clearly. I want to see what she's not telling us more clearly come through.
Every time I have brought one of these, I'm really trying to rattle my brain around is she actually doing something sort of highbrow and cool? But she's not. She's not.
It's close.
I feel like
but it's not.
And anything that's kind of close, I really don't feel, after reading this a couple of times, was intentional. I don't think it was.
Yeah.
And if it was, I think she overall failed at that.
Yes. I kind of agree. I think it could have been more in control.
I mean, okay, so I don't know how long we've been going. I checked the clock at 1:16. At that point, I think we'd been going for
10 minutes.
I mean, and I think we can just keep talking. I mean, what would you? I actually do feel firm in rating this a 2 out of 5. I think this is a 2 out of 5.
Yeah, I think I would give it a 3 out of 5.
Yeah.
You know, I always seem to inflate by one. But yeah, I appreciate the craft behind it. I just wasn't ultimately that compelled.
And I will say, at the end of the day, it is just exciting to hear from people who don't have Wikipedia pages.
Exactly. Which
in this space.
Absolutely take that as a W. Thanks, Deb.
Yeah, thank you so much, Deborah Treisman. And we didn't really dive too much into this, but like, I mean, I don't know. Like, it can't just be that we're like seeing these things because we have confirmation bias with this, like,
right.
Like, I mean, like, it is, these coincidences are getting a bit like weird and sort of cosmic. Like, I don't know if like God's trying to communicate with us through the New Yorker, if Deborah really is surveilling us. Something it's a bit
is going on.
Odd.
I agree.
But I mean, any other thoughts about, well, here, why don't we look at pictures of her and just continue to, I always like looking at pictures of these. She looks radically different in this photo, in my opinion.
Yeah, I can't.
In a lot of these photos, her faces look like completely different. She kind of looks like Grimes in this one.
I just feel like the haircut is doing a lot of, I think her haircut is like sort of changed, and that has actually dramatically changed the face.
I think you're absolutely right.
I like this look for her more, I think.
But why was she like growing out a turf bang or something? Why does she have this one? Did she get this chunk of hair pulled out of her scalp?
Looks like it's just on the wrong side.
But why is this little chunk of her part so short compared to all the other hair?
Or something.
Probably. And you know what? She is a 45 to 48-year-old woman.
I like this one.
Yeah. I mean, she looks incredible for her age.
Yeah, she really does. Oh, she's growing out these bangs, maybe?
I see, yeah.
I like the bangs on her.
I like the bangs too. I actually think she's really, really pretty.
Yeah.
And I absolutely could see her like driving the kind of like David Foster Wallace dweeb at grad school like crazy, you know?
Absolutely.
She has that kind of face.
Which, good for her. God bless.
She kind of does have a little bit of a manic pixie dream girl look to her face. And so maybe that's why she wrote that little girl like that, because maybe she was just this precocious wonderkin.
Exactly.
You know?
And good for her. Okay.
Well, yeah. I mean,
that's all I got.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's all I got too. I mean, yeah, I mean, thank you so much for listening.
Slay.
Yeah. Okay. Why don't you, if you are listening on Spotify, I will sort of like encourage you to leave a 5-star rating. Just like it'll take you a second, and it just, you know, gives me a sort of outsized, joyous, like, don't you want me to be happy? Don't you, listening to this, want me to feel happy about something in my life?
Something to feel happy about.
Would you read her book or no? And then we'll go.
I probably would not read the book because I don't know if the content is something that would really interest me.
Yeah.
How about you?
I wouldn't read the book either, but yeah, I would kind of feel fine about getting coffee with her, like getting a beer with her if she was like in the neighborhood.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's it. Okay. Thank you guys so much for listening. We love you so much.